My name is Caitlin Cameron. I'm a resident here at Ecovillage at Ithaca, and I'm the project director for Thrive, which is the education and outreach arm for our Ecovillage. And I'm speaking today with Ojok Okello, who is the founder and CEO of Okere City in Uganda. And he's also happens to be a Humphrey Fellow here at Cornell, which is how we got connected with him. And we're hoping today to learn more about this community that is being created and flourishing in Uganda. So, Ojok, do you want to introduce yourself and say a few words about what's happening in Okere City?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Kathleen. So I'm a development professional. So for the past 20 years, I have been working at the forefront of community development and championing democracy, good governance, and human rights in Uganda. And it's a passion that I have, but also it's, a training. The work I do is strongly grounded in my experience, but also my academic background. So I studied rural development from Makerere University, and I also studied international development at the London School of Economics, and here at Cornell, I'm also a Humphrey Fulbright Fellow, which specifically target, community development professionals around the world. So the work that I do in Okere and my profession and my training are inextricably linked. And just briefly, the work that I am doing in Okere starts in 2019. And, this is after working for about 10 years with international development organizations, but also with the public service, with the government in Uganda. But as I did my work, I kind of felt so much disconnected from the practical challenges that people in rural areas of Uganda face. And particularly for me, my community in northern Uganda, a village which is still reeling from the devastations of conflict, a village suffering from very high rates of illiteracy, a village where people do not have access to proper medical care, but also water and sanitation services. So I got compelled to do something about this village. And the question that I kept asking myself over and over again was a moral one. How can I use my privileges of, being a well-trained professional? How can I use my skills? How can I use my money? How can I use my network to try to build something much bigger than myself, something which could continually be helpful, now, but also in decades or centuries when I'm long gone. And just to provide a little context, my village, which is in the northern part of Uganda, was embroiled in a protracted conflict for over 30 years, mounted by a notorious warlord called Joseph Kony, who still right now is not yet arrested, is in the jungles, but in the Central African Republic. But for 20 years, he kept, abducting children, he kept killing women, his soldiers raped thousands upon thousands, but also most importantly, up to about 80,000 children in in my village, but also in the entirety of the northern Uganda region were abducted. up to around 100,000 lives were lost, including my father's and my grandfather's, sadly. But also in my village alone, just 500 people were killed as a result of this conflict. And I grew up, the initial years of my life I spent in an IDP camp. But luckily my mother worked really hard and she was able to get us out of the camp. And that is how I was able to go to school and continue to make a better life for myself. But then these challenges like water scarcity in the village, women going to draw water from unprotected wells and suffering, the village suffering from diseases like bilharzia, and then drought that continues to affect the village because of climate change now, hindering and significantly hampering agricultural productivity makes life to be very, very difficult in the village. So with my knowledge, with my skills, with my privileges, and I then ask myself, how do we confront these challenges? And then in 2019, we started Okere Community Development Project, which we popularly call Okere City. And basically, we're thinking about in this village, which is about 10 square miles, how with a population of about 6,000 people, how do we work collaboratively as a community? How do we all participate as a community to create a center in the heart of the village that does not only create employment opportunities, but also provide basic services and products, whilst at the same time conserving the environment and protecting the nature that we have. And so we started working so hard to make sure that, we provide these products and services. So fast forward, we created a small grocery store in the center of the village, that sells very basic things, like salt, soap, and sugar. We started a local market where women in the village can bring their agricultural produce and sell, but also buy from others. We started a barber shop. We started a village bank in the village, providing not only financial literacy training, but also offering affordable microcredit to the women to start up small businesses. We started a local restaurant. We started a fashion and design place where women can come to learn how to mend and make clothes. We started a community agricultural farm, where we produce crops, but also train farmers on organic or agroecological farming methods. We also started up a functional adult literacy facility, training women in the village on basic literacy, basic things like learning how to read and write, because 90% of the women in the village did not even go to elementary school, so they can't read and write, and this really significantly hampers progress. We started a local bakery. We started a health center in the village, as well as a primary school and a early childhood development center. And all our work in the village is powered by solar energy. So we have solar panels that provide lighting services, but also the small things, like running the health center, like refrigeration services and all these things. We mostly use solar energy. But also, most importantly, the work in our construction projects is significantly facilitated by available local materials like the bamboo, which we have, and the elephant grass. So, we have houses that are built using these materials, because the alternative would be to use burnt bricks. And, these burnt bricks consume a lot of wood. and you have to destroy very many trees to be able to have bricks. But so we opted to use these kind of sustainable construction materials. But also, most importantly, we really believe that centering the participation of women and making sure that we expand the agency of the women in the village, that's the most important asset that we probably could do to transform the village, because the village is a highly patriarchal society. And one of the ways is to change mindsets. First of all, equip the women with the skills, the knowledge, and the tools they need to champion change, but also engage the men, so that we can slowly but very surely change this mindset that, the men are the most powerful people and they should be the ones who take charge of all the transformation that the village needs. And of course, we also believe so much in human capital development, particularly through education. So whether it is investing in the children, right from when they are 3 years old, to training an old 80-year-old, 80 years old woman, we believe that once we invest in education, slowly but very surely we shall build a crop of people who believe in transformative change, who have the tools, who have the skills and the knowledge to champion this kind of change that we need to transform our village. But also, most importantly, in as far as climate action is concerned, the village is located on a belt in northern Uganda where shea trees grow in their natural abundance. But the problem is that when people started returning to their homes after the war, people started resorted to cutting down the shea trees to make charcoal, because the wood from shea trees fetches premium value charcoal, compared to other charcoal. Just for context, up to about 97% of the people in Uganda use charcoal and wood for cooking food. So that means that significantly large amounts of trees are being cut out. And just in 20 years, between the year 2020, between the year 2000 and the year 2020, the village lost up to about 70% of its trees cover. And how would we reverse this dangerous trend? One is we started planting more trees, more shea trees. So every year we plant up to about 3,000 shea trees. But also, most importantly, we sensitize the community and we work with local enforcement, law enforcement authority to make sure that, people will continue cutting down the shea trees stubbornly are arrested, for instance, because the local laws allow for this to happen. And significantly, we have, in the past year, 2023, we didn't register any cases of the shea trees being cut down just because of the small action that we take. But also, most importantly, we invest in the shea nuts, work with the women to collect the shea nuts, and then we work with them again to add value to the shea nut. So we produce shea butter from the village, which we sell locally in Uganda and within the East African region. And recently in 2024, we were able to introduce and launch the product on Amazon in the United States. And we are also working on doing this the same in the United Kingdom and also later in the European Union. So for people who don't know about shea butter is probably the world's best moisturizing cream. If you visited the stores, all these products that, that have moisturizing properties have shea butter used as a raw material. But what we sell is Nilotica shea butter in its raw, purest, and natural form. So it significantly moisturizes the skin. It also has anti-aging properties. It helps in the healing of the wounds. It will make your skin glow, and it's also very good for maintaining hair, for instance. So one of the ways you could support us is to go to Amazon and buy the product on Amazon. When one thinks about the work that we do at Okere City, in many ways, our work emerges as a rural futuristic experiment. Now, rural futurism is this idea that villages shouldn't just be thought about as places where you keep animals, livestock in this case, as places where you only grow crops, corn or whatever it is you're growing. And as villages, as basically these places that do not have a role in the construction of a more sustainable and technologically advanced society. But rather, rural futurism imagines that the countryside could actually be the best place where the future, a more sustainable future, can be constructed. One, because there is land, so we can still plant more and more trees, which can sequester carbon and ensure that the climate that we have is conserved and protected, one. But also, there are human resources in the village. And if people are trained, if people are mentored, if people are supported, they can have skills that can significantly contribute not only to the local economy within the village, but also within the global economy. But also in the villages, culture, people's authentic cultural practices and experiences, whether it's spirituality, whether it is relations amongst people. These are privileges that you can only find in a closely knit community, in a village, things you might not probably get from cities. And so once we invest in villages, it is very important that these places can emerge as places where our mental well-being, where our health, both physical, mental, spiritually, are significantly enriched. But also, most importantly, we are an example of a sustainable development experiment. As you can imagine, our work contributes to about 80% of the sustainable development goals. So whether it is SDG 1, which is fighting poverty, or SDG 3, which is education, or SDG 8, which is on inclusive economic growth, or on climate action. We are trying to do this, but most importantly, we try to do this within the context of partnership and cooperation and collaboration, which is, again, one of the reasons why we are having this conversation today with the Thrive Ecovillage of Ithaca, because, we believe that our work, as a remote rural project, in Africa can only make sense when we center ourselves, in a global movement and be part of engagements with other people around the world as well. So yeah. So as a rural futuristic experiment, that's just what I mentioned already. Yeah, the other aspect about our work is that we are also an experiment of community tourism. So every often, we welcome visitors to the village, visitors from within northern Uganda, from within Uganda, and from all over the world, So people come to learn from our culture, from our tradition, but also most importantly, from the work that we are doing, right? From the community development projects that we are running. And through this work, people, come to volunteer not only their time, so as they are learning, they are also contributing towards the betterment of the village. So we've had people who are teachers, for instance, they've come to the village and they've stayed for weeks or months. People who are community health, who are health professionals, nurses or doctors, they come to our health facility. So again, we are welcoming everybody, who thinks that they have something to offer and who is desirous to be part of a progressive and futuristic community. Please, you can always reach out. But most importantly as well is that our work is really, really contributing to conversations and debates, but also practically demonstrating, positive elements of migration. Now, in Africa, there is an en masse movement of people away from villages because of the problem that villages are thought of as hopeless places that do not have something to offer to build a better world. So people go away. And when people go away, it's only the old people and children and women that are left. And this is disintegrating families in the village when the young men go away. But also when people go to the cities, conditions in the African cities are not really the best. In African cities, unemployment is a big problem. The slums are developing at a very fast rate. And when nothing is done to control this from the source, then the cities will become very problematic places. For instance, it's projected that up to about 80% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa will be living in cities by 2050, for instance. Now, once that continues, up to about 75% of these will be living in slums. And this comes with its attendant negative consequences like crime, like antisocial behaviors, and all those things, which we see in African cities. And our work, tries to create opportunities in the village so that people don't move. As a matter of fact, we've been able to attract up to 50 young people, professional teachers, nurses, who had initially left the village to go to the city. Now they have come back, to work at home, contributing to local economic development at home, but also most importantly, staying together with their families. And this significantly strengthen family and social relations in the village. But also most importantly, and lastly, our work really also contributes to empowering the next generation of young people. So we have different social activities, we have sporting activities, we have a boxing club, we have a football, soccer club. We call it football in Uganda, but here in America, it's soccer. We have a soccer club. And, young people just coming together to engage in a series of initiatives that we run, brings them together and disables them from participating in unproductive activities, and in addition to the jobs that we create as well. So by 2030, as Okere City, we just want to create this village where people are happier, wealthier, and healthier. A lovely place, equal and just society, a greener place, a place where people are skilled, where people have knowledge, and most importantly, really a place where children love to be around, and where artists come and where authentic cultures and local cultural experiences are enhanced and experienced, but also, and very importantly, a place where most people really just want to come to either over the weekend for a day or come and stay for a month or two and contribute towards the development of the local community. Back to you, Kathleen. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I really appreciate having that overview. And you really um, were articulate about uh, quite a few of the things that inspired you to start this project, but progress that you've been able to make and things that have developed. I am curious, um, just for my own understanding of the context, what was there uh, before you started? What was the village like? How many people lived there? What kinds of buildings and industry was there before you formally started the project?
Well, we have to go back um, 30 years earlier. So 30 years earlier, the village was, you know, a thriving savanna, a thriving village in the African savanna, you know,
Mhm.
in terms of people being happy, in terms of people being productively engaged in their farms, rural farms, in terms of people living in their small grass thatched huts, which are lovely, well aerated, nicely conditioned. Um, but then this life completely changes with these civil war, with the
Mhm.
rebel activities, where everybody in the village is forced to leave the village and go away into internally displaced people's camps.
Okay.
And people live in this village, in these camps away from their homes for like 15 years, 20
Mhm.
years. So when they come back to the village, there is nothing in the village. The
Mhm.
grass thatched houses had been burnt, the walls had fallen,
Mhm.
the gardens had grown, the grass and the trees. In terms of climate, though, the trees were more,
Mhm.
in terms of nature.
Mhm.
Um, but then when people then settles in, this nature starts being degraded,
Okay.
right? Because either people were clearing farmlands, or people just wanted quick money. So cut down a shea tree and burn charcoal and get some money. So basically, this is when trouble starts, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and the problem is when people returns, uh, they had lived in ITP camps. They did not go to school. They had acquired HIV and AIDS.
Mhm.
Remember, they went to
Mhm.
these urban settings, and either the teenage girls started engaging in prostitution because there was no food to eat,
Mhm.
and they come back to the village with all this baggage, uh, illiterate, sick, uh, traumatized,
Mhm.
and all these things. So the foundation is so weak to build a sort of a decent life. So what happens? Domestic violence
Mhm.
proliferates. Um, uh, uh, Power structures in the village significantly get distorted. Children, do not want to go to school. Like they just do not have a mentality of being productive.
Mhm.
Agricultural productivity is significantly weakened because people had stayed away from the farm for so long, and yet they return and they still need to live off the farm. So people don't want to be productively engaged. So young people start engaging in theft and robbery and all these things. So life becomes so distorted in the village. And the I don't care attitude is basically everywhere. And so this is where I come then in 2019 and see all these things, and I'm so confused about what I could do,
Mhm.
right? And and then just out of the blue, I gathered all the strength I could. I talked to the local community, and we start imagining what could be the silver linings that we have in this dark cloud. What are the low-hanging fruits that we could pick? And we noticed that despite all the problems, people still wanted to be together, because being together is what they did when they were in the camp,
Mhm.
right? So when they return, people still want to be together, whether it is being together to drink local beer, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So for me, that was my entry point. Like,
Mhm.
people still want to be together. So how do we penetrate this spirit of unity, this
Mhm.
spirit of togetherness, this culture of interaction that still exists? And then once we penetrated this and we started bringing people together, to drink still, because that's one of the very first projects we did, was actually like a pub, like a local pub where people come to drink. Yeah, because for me it was very important that I do not chastise,
Mhm.
um start hurling insult at people who are getting drunk, who so I look at what it is that brings them. Well, it's the beer, so let's start up a pub. And once we have this pub, they come, and I have access to talk to them, to understand their worldviews and their viewpoints. And this becomes really, really important to bring people together, for me to engage them, tell them my ideas, listen from them what they think, and then we start building, this ecosystem within the village that then tries to provide these social support, provide employment opportunities, provide jobs and services. And this is basically how we then start to build this project within the village.
That's great. Yeah, it sticks out in my mind that I've heard you say you had never heard the term eco-village
Yeah,
before
yeah,
coming here
yeah.
to Ithaca. And uh eco-village might be considered a new term or novel term for a lot of people. A lot of people haven't heard that before, know what that might be. And here at Ecovillage at Ithaca, the way that I've heard it described is an intentional community that is founded on um, goals for all kinds of sustainability, so ecological sustainability, but also economic and social sustainability. And you're certainly describing all three of those kinds of sustainability when you talk about Okere City. So we talk about uh, some components or ingredients to eco villages, green architecture, alternative energy, local sustainable food production, um, uh, participatory governance, having means and desire around social connection. Um, so to my mind, when I hear you talk about Okere City, I would certainly call it an eco village, but I'm curious um, what you think about that, and what does what what more would you like to see happening to um, fulfill this vision that you have? Like, where is there more to go? What is missing now from your version of an eco village?
Yeah. Well, I think that in all ways we are indeed an eco village, from the readings and from the research and from the knowledge that I then get. Then I'm like, oh, I wish we had actually called our project Okere Eco Village, right?
Mhm.
Um, but then I'm like, so the name Okere City, I didn't even start it. So once we start providing these services and products, the people in the village just start calling it a city. Because, of course, when people go to a town, when people go to a city, they are trying to access these services and products that we are now providing in this space in the village. So to them, this is a city, right? And just simply, very simply like that, we start calling it a city and the name stuck. But indeed, what we are actually building is an eco village, and that was at least at the back of my mind, even when we are providing these basic services like salt, sugar, and school, and all these, the premise, the foundation of it must be ecologically sustainable, right? So whether it's in the energy that we use, whether it's in the buildings that we put up, whether it is in teaching the children at the school about how to live a more sustainable life, so that they start learning about these things, so that they see that when their mothers at home are using charcoal and firewood, that it is not the way it should be, because some of us, when we grew up, it was okay. There was absolutely nothing wrong about cutting down a tree to make charcoal to cook food which keep us alive, right? But then starting to teach the children about these things. But also when we start, as farmers, we are farmers, when we go to our gardens, why should we use weed killers, like pesticides? Why should we spend a lot of money to go and buy, these weed killers, to buy these fertilizers, and yet we can use the poop from the animals that we have. We could get our fertilizers from this. Once we start encouraging, promoting, and supporting the farmers to start looking at all these things that we had initially looked at as waste, to not harness the potential of the sun, which we have every day for 8 hours, then we are not getting something right. And so in many ways, then we actually become an embodiment of what an eco village is. And from the beginning, this is what we have been doing. And if in any case, we should increasingly, focus our attention into becoming even a more replicable model of an eco village in an African context. Because then when I start immersing myself in the understanding of what eco-village is or what eco-villages are, then I start seeing it as a Western concept, as something that most people think it's only for, city people who want to live a more ecological lifestyle, right? But what about village people who must live a more ecological life? What about and I think what we contribute to this discourse, to this movement of eco-village is how can rural people be supported to live a more ecological life? And I think that is what really the most important aspect that we contribute.
I think that's an excellent point, and a good perspective to add to the conversation. And seeing what you're doing and reflecting on my own experience here at Ecovillage at Ithaca, we're also talking about cultural shifts. I think, well, it's an interesting dynamic, and I'd be curious to hear your perspective from Uganda, but in the United States, it's a very individualistic culture, and at least, in this contemporary time. And a lot of people remark that coming to a community like an eco-village um, could be a challenge for them because they're so accustomed to um, just centuries of this culture of each person for themselves and the power of money and consumerism and having control over your little plot of land and your home and not having to answer to other people. And so that's a challenge even when people choose to come here. It takes time for people to adjust to this way of thinking about sharing things, about sharing property, about helping take care of things together, making decisions together. Um, which is how humans have lived for most of our history. It's a more recent thing that we're so individualistic. But I'm curious about that dynamic where you are, in what ways are you preserving Ugandan culture, and in what ways are you innovating and sort of shifting culture and practices? And you have touched on that a little bit, but I don't know if you have further
Yeah.
thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, so and the way people live in New York or in Ithaca, individual, independent.
Hmm.
I mean, this is the kind of life that many people in African cities live as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
People live in their little apartments. They don't even know their most immediate neighbor. Um, there is very little things that bring them together, and increasingly individualism or a more private life or a more me and me alone lifestyle. It's a problem,
Hmm.
not just in America, but in all uh, urban
Hmm.
parts of Africa as well. And for me, as somebody who was immersed in this life, living and working in Kampala for 10 years, I got so sick of it. I got so tired of it. And the one of the reasons that made it so easy for me to decide to actually ultimately make a U-turn and completely go back to the village was this desire to live a more people-centered life, was this idea that life is most meaningful when lived in concert with
Hmm.
another, is this idea that human well-being, that our life is only meaningful when we lend a hand to another, especially, those who need it the most.
Yeah.
And having this understanding, and in Africa, particularly in rural Africa, there is what we call Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is this philosophy that I am because we are.
Mm.
And since we are, then I am. And if this philosophy become the anchor, becomes the fulcrum that balances both your inner being and outer being, then it becomes very, very easy to embrace this idea of an eco village,
Mhm.
because there is just so much to gain when you come together as a community. There is almost nothing to lose,
Mhm.
right? Of
Mhm.
course, you could lose your independence. You could lose your privacy. People will know more and more about you than you probably want people to know, right? And sometimes um and as like a local leader in the village, increasingly my privacy is lost. Everybody cares about, you have been away from the village for 1 week. Where have you been?
Mhm.
Right? And it's almost like feel uh, people feel that I should account to them more and more. Sometimes I tell them, I'm not even a politician. Like, you didn't vote for me or anything. So, and I don't need your vote. So maybe you should cut me some slack sometimes, and don't care so much about my personal life.
Right.
But just like I'm telling you in this fun way, that's what I lose perhaps. But I mean, I think it's a lesser insignificant loss
Right. Right.
than than the greater good
Yeah.
of than the greater good that the world needs
Mhm.
to to be stronger, that the
Mhm.
people need to be more empowered, to be
Mhm.
more enlightened, to have more agency so that we can build a better civilization.
Mhm.
Because a civilization is only strong to the extent that people are together and to the extent that people believe
Mhm.
in the idea of progress for all, not progress for me.
And
Yeah.
do you see that happening in Okere City? Do you see that sensibility coming forward?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have been very deliberate in nurturing that. It's a collective spirit that already exists, of
Mhm.
course.
Mhm.
But if we take that for granted, it can easily be devastated.
Mhm.
It's like sometimes when you have a precious jewel and you do not embrace and protect and love it, it gets destroyed, and then you start reminiscing and you start wishing, I
Mhm.
wish I protected it. And
Mhm.
so for us as a village, as a project, we are really investing in cultural assets that we
Mhm.
have. So, whether it is organizing community theater,
Mhm.
whether it's organizing cultural productions, whether it is holding cultural dance and music, whether it is still bringing people to drink local beer together, whether it is teaching our children in the local language and
Mhm.
encouraging them to debate and to speak the local language. It is these things that we take so serious and continue to invest in, right? So that people understand that our culture, our local realities are good, are
Mhm.
strong, are important.
Right.
Although, of course, they exist within a global context as
Mhm.
well, right? So we are always trying to balance, these kind of two realities
Yeah.
and these two worlds. And we think that when we continue to do that, it will just create, a village that is not that is still connected with itself, but also a village that is connected to the outside world.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. It's relevant. Yeah. And I think something that people don't always think about is while there might be these goals around um sustainability and empowerment and education, a quality of life has to be at the center of all these things, right? That you're not just doing them because they're the right things to do, but to addressing this idea that creating places that provide high quality of life. Um, I'm wondering if you could just briefly speak a little bit about governance and decision making and how that happens in
Yeah.
Okere City. Yeah.
Yeah, so the village exists within a local governance structure, like the national government, local government. So there are local council authorities, there are local councillors, there are politically elected leaders in the village. But our project is a non-profit community-based organization independent of an existing governance structure, so to speak. So, and because of this, we have decided to compose a local board in the village consisting of the local political leaders, the religious leaders, the cultural leaders, and influential people in the village come together in a board, and through these apparatus, decisions are made, new ideas are brought forward, discussed, and then we continually organize quarterly board meetings with this outfit called the Okere board. But outside this big board, which is outside this main board, there are committees across the board. So for instance, the school has its own committee composed of teachers, parents, and other important people in the community and other local people in the community. But the Shea Cooperative Society also has its committee. The health program also has its own health committee. The village bank also has its own committee. So the most important units are these committees because they meet sometimes on a weekly basis if there is an issue to address, or they meet on a monthly basis, which is a periodic, meeting that must be held, and they discuss project-specific progress and challenges and provide solutions. So this is basically how we operate as a project. But at the end of the day, in addition to this big board structure that we have under committees, we also organize monthly community days. So every month there is a community day where there are most of the times 1,000+ people, where we just discuss what is happening in the village, where we discuss progress that is being made, where we discuss challenges, and where we also offer solutions to the challenges that we face. So this kind of, swinging and a cocktail of, community participatory forums and engagements, it really give us the opportunity to make sure that at the end of the day, it's the voice of the local person, it is the perspective and insight of the local people that matter, provided it is informed by a reality that is important for the village. Yeah.
So what do you imagine Okere City will look like in 30 years? What do you hope that it will look like? Will you still be there?
Yeah. So what we've been so much working on is how Okere City will be in 2010. That I have a very, very fervent picture. And by 2010, we really want to be able to demonstrate that this idea works in practice. So between 2020, 2019, 2020, when we started, to 2030, 10 years, we are on an experimental phase. So everything that we are doing is just to try to demonstrate that when you do this, when you engage the local people, when you create an ecosystem where, dozens of operations are happening almost simultaneously, that you can create this sort of impact, that you can bring about this kind of transformation, right? And we want to make sure that we have data to demonstrate this. And that is one of the reasons why, at Cornell, I've been trying to engage the academics, but also students, so that we can engage in scientific research, to have a body of evidence to demonstrate that, participation, this is what you achieve when people participate. This is what you achieve when you make sure that children go to school at this time and teach them this way. This is what happens when you conserve and protect nature and you sequester this amount of carbon, for instance. You get, so this is the picture that I have, at least for 10 years. After 10 years, after 2030, once we have gotten the basics right, I think that we shall emerge then as probably one of the most catalytic, one of the most transformative and impactful rural development experiment ever conducted in Africa, at least.
Something to look forward to.
Yes, the future is exciting, indeed.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. Is there anything else you want people to know about the project or what you're doing
Yes,
before
yes.
we wrap up?
Please, everybody who is watching, you should get, just spare 10 minutes or 5 minutes of your time to look out for our work online. Our website is okerecity.org, and across the social media platforms, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Instagram, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Facebook or X, at Okere City. This is where you'll find a lot of information about our work, and CNN, The Guardian, the Christian Science Monitor, and a host of other local newspapers in Uganda, have fervently documented the work that we do. And from our website, you will find all this information. And should you be interested to be a part of our work, whether it's being a client, buying our products, the share butter, whether it's donating to support our cause, whether it's wanting to be part of our global network of volunteers and researchers and interns, please reach out. You definitely have something to contribute. Just imagine a village which has everything that you can contribute to. So you could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, you could be an architect. We actually need lots of architects to help us with the planning, and design. And whatever it is that you do, I think that you can help us build this kind of future eco-village that we look to build. Thank you.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thanks. I look forward to our continued conversations and partnerships around all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Have a brilliant day.
Yeah.